Hi, I'm Tim Penketh of TheFutureEconomy.ca. We recently partnered with SecureKey to produce a panel on the future of digital ID in Canada. SecureKey is a leading Canadian identity and authentication provider, and their tech, which you might know as Verified.me, simplifies consumer access to online services and applications. Today's session features Greg Wolfond, who's SecureKey's chairman and CEO, as well as Joni Brennan, the president of the Digital ID and Authentication Council of Canada, or DIACC, and Franklin Garrigues, TD's vice president of Digital Channel. It's moderated by the FutureEconomy.ca's very own Florent Thévenin. The session today is going to focus on a few topics, including what is digital ID and why is it important for Canada's governments, industries, and all citizens as a whole? What must be done to position Canada to lead in digital ID in terms of policy development, tech development, and the adoption of digital ID going forward? How can we progress the PanCanadian trust framework? And what are the experts' recommendations on the next key steps Canada must take to place digital ID at the center of our future digital economy? I hope you enjoy the session and find it as insightful as I did, and please let us know what you thought about it. Take care. Bye.
Greg, Joni, Franklin, great to be speaking with you today. So today we're going to talk about digital ID and document verification, a topic that is perhaps not very well known and perhaps not appreciated enough in terms of its impact on our economy and our society. So let's start with a simple question, and I'll start with you, Joni. What is digital ID and document verification, and why does it matter for industries, for governments, and frankly for all of us citizens?
Hi, I'm Joni Brennan. I'm president of the Digital ID and Authentication Council of Canada. I've had the pleasure of working in this field for about 20 years now, and digital identity, I would say, is a collection of assertions about you, and that's a simple way to think about it. And so I am Canadian. I live in British Columbia. I'm a woman. So think about all of these attestations and attributes about who you are. Digital identity is the digital representation of these things, and it's the way that you present them to perform different kinds of transactions, maybe with your bank, maybe with your government, with your telecommunications provider, or your child's school, for example. So it's the digital representation of who you are.
Greg or Franklin, anything to add to Joni's description of digital ID?
Hi, I'm Franklin Garrigues. I'm a vice president at TD Bank based in Toronto, and I'm looking at TD after files including digital identity and open banking. The only thing I would add is digital ID is a foundation of e-commerce, a foundation of internet and how we live on internet, and it's a foundation that is being built, and that is why we're all here and passionate about digital identity.
Hi, I'm Greg Wolfond. I'm the CEO of SecureKey Technologies based in Toronto. The only thing I would add is that this is a cyber world we live in, and the bad folks are out there and they're trying to get names and IDs, and they're breaching data to try and become people. So it's not even just digital, it's just general ID. People showing up to go for a test drive and it's not the person they say and they disappear with the car, or someone trying to get in and create a bank account in your name. How does a person prove that he or she is the person they say they are, whether they're in person, whether they're on the phone, or whether they're online? That's kind of the challenge we have before us, and that's what we're all trying to solve.
It's hard to have any conversation today about, frankly, any topic without relating it to COVID-19 and the pandemic that we find ourselves in Canada and around the world. Does this pandemic have any bearing on digital ID?
So absolutely, the COVID-19 has, people have said COVID-19 has driven digital adoption in 3 months as much as we have seen in years, and a few technology firms have mentioned that we're seeing a great acceleration, and I think it's true for every businesses who are present on digital. Adoption has really accelerated, and in doing so, the COVID-19 has highlighted that some of the foundations of e-commerce, of our digital world, were missing, and we've seen a few examples in government. We've seen a few examples in the private sector, where the last mile, the connecting and authenticating and proving who we are, has been lacking. And I can share an example at TD. We sometimes have been relying on customers going to the branch to authenticate themselves, to identify themselves when they open an account. Even when they go online, sometimes, in some cases, we ask customers to come in person. And that was okay, that was appropriate in the pre-COVID world. COVID has highlighted that it's not okay anymore. We need to be 100% online, including the identity step. And so this is a very tangible, practical example we've seen. And I know there's been many of them across industry and governments.
And Joni, it seems like digital ID would be particularly important in the health sector, and especially now. First of all, am I right? And does it have bearings on other sectors specifically, more than others, perhaps?
Yes, digital ID is something that I would call horizontal. I think that's similar to what's been said as digital identity being a foundation. So what that means is that the ability to authenticate and to prove who you are, or for a business to prove who they are, an organization, this is at the foundation of exchanging information, exchanging value, exchanging money for transactions. So this touches into every space. And I would say with regard to healthcare and the pandemic, digital ID has created much more of an urgency, and Franklin talked about how that's moved the space forward. We often talked about digital ID pre-COVID in terms of convenience, the convenience that it would bring to people and businesses and governments. Well, today we're talking about making sure that food can be on the table, making sure that people can continue to work in the remote workforce. So it's driven identity from not only being a convenience to a matter of national, social, and economic security.
Greg, tell us a little bit about the digital ID ecosystem in Canada. You lead, I suppose, one of the companies that's at the forefront of it. What does your surrounding look like?
We've been at this for a while, and Canada's done a great job very early on of realizing there's a benefit in public-private partnership. Right? There's a login service where you can use your bank, for example, to log into CRA or log into Service Canada. And during COVID, go back to the COVID thing, over 3 million new people signed up for government, got their benefits, and they had it right away. They could log in with their bank and go right ahead. So this is a great win-win kind of partnership. There's hundreds of millions of logons that people do a year where they don't have to remember another uppercase, lowercase, number, letter, password. They can log in with their strong, trusted financial institution and go from there. Canada has a great ecosystem because Canada has all kinds of people playing in the space. The work that British Columbia is doing on verifiable credentials, the work that other companies are doing to add other attributes. At the end of the day, what makes an ecosystem work is this multitude of things for you to be able to prove you are who you say you are, right? So if I can show up and I can prove from TD Bank where TD says, yes, this is Greg Wolfond, he logged in right now. And I can get the telco to say, yeah, that person has Greg's phone, and we were able to ping the phone and the phone is here. And lastly, if I can get government ID, I can scan a passport or a driver's license and be able to prove I have it. These are what I know, what I have, what I am. They're the factors of security. And at the end of the day, with the cyber folks out there, we need more of these to come together. So what I love about Canada is under umbrella, particularly what Joni's doing at DIACC, all of these people who are providing different attributes, different parts of that mosaic that help you prove you are coming together to create a standard that says I should be able to prove I have my driver's license. But it's possible someone could fake that and have an image that goes across. What if I can also prove I can log into my bank with what I know and all the checks and balances a bank does? What if I can prove my phone? The combination of these is what's going to make Canadians safe, and working together is how we kind of lead the world in some of the things that we're thinking and what we're trying to do.
A quick follow-up on that. Most Canadians will at least be familiar or have heard about the COVID Alert app. Again, any relationship between digital ID and that app? And do you think that adoption of that app in a way can also, help people to familiarize themselves with digital ID?
Yeah, I think the app is different. Canada did a good job of keeping privacy within the app. So lots of people are downloading the app. It's able to check who's around you. It's not tracking you. It'll notify you if you've been near someone who has it. So Canada really took privacy to heart when they built that. And I think people came together to do it well. I think Canada generally in things like COVID and things like digital ID has this recognition, hey, this is a problem we have to solve for citizens, whether it's getting them benefits because of the pandemic, or whether it's helping me prove who I am to get my health records or open a bank account or do these things. They're aware that the bad folks are out there, right? There was a recent breach of one of the government agencies where they're collecting passwords and trying to retry them. There's a breach of some credit agencies. There's been a breach of some financial institutions. The bad people aren't going away. So how do we combine strengths and be able to combat this and make the Canadian economy more resilient? As it gets more digital, we can become more resilient because we can open accounts faster. We can get our health care and speak to a doctor faster. We can do all the things, get a loan, get a mortgage, open a new bank account, all those things we want to do. But now we're uncomfortable, right? I don't want to hand my driver's license to someone and have them hand it back, and I'm worried about touching and the contact kind of stuff. So an urgency is kind of lit up to say we have to do it. But what I love about Canada is you're seeing the telcos, you're seeing the banks, you're seeing government say, hey, we have to do this and bring our assets to bear to make this work. And so there's a dialogue that's happening, but there's a willingness to say, hey, let's make this work for our citizens. And I love that about Canada.
So all three of you have already shared some strengths and weaknesses. So I'd just like to go around and ask you each to name what you think is perhaps Canada's main strength and main weaknesses in the digital ID and in the cybersecurity space. I'll start with you, Joni.
Yeah, I would say Canada's main strength in terms of addressing the opportunities and challenges related to digital identity would be the level and spirit of our collaboration. And so the size of our country, the diversity of our country, just enough diversity with a principle and a value system that is based on cooperation. That's at the root of Canada's existence as confederation. So we do have that as part of our DNA, and we do have that as a strength. And I think that's why you see the financial sector is strongly participating. You see the telecommunications sector participating. You don't see that in every other part of the world. I would also say at times that our collaboration is one of our weaknesses at the same time. We need to be able to work across Canada collaboratively to solve these challenges. And so, for example, digital identity is largely, legal identity is largely rooted within the provinces. And so your original birth record, you existing, is rooted out of the province that you were born in. Now, unless you're an immigrant to Canada, as I am, then my root is with the federal government. So many people's are rooted in the provinces and not with the federal government. So actually, the federal government is a consumer of identity from other places around Canada. So in this sense, we do need to supercharge and bring efficiency to the collaboration that we have, helping the federal government play its important role, the provinces play their role, the banks and the institutions and the telcos to play their role. And so I think that's what Greg was talking about is we do have this village of collaboration. So that's something that's really helping us move forward. And not only that, with this level of diversity, we have a good opportunity of actually exporting the way that we go forward to other places around the world.
Franklin, what is your strength and your weakness?
Joni said it very well. It is both our collaboration, completely agree, both a strength and a weakness. I want to pick another one to complement. I think I've been impressed time and again by the level of skills that Canada has, the talent Canada has on identity. And it dawned on me when talking to other countries how more advanced the dialogue in Canada is on the topic and how advanced the thinking is. And I also realized that a lot of what I felt was were foreign endeavors or businesses or initiatives on identity. There's a lot of Canadians leading these across the world. It's actually quite impressive. So I do believe Canada has a bit of a very special place with a lot of talent, a lot of expertise, a lot of experience on identity. And so it's very logical that we would be thought leaders, and it shows. And so I'm very proud of that. I think that's a key strength that Canada has. Challenge, I think the challenge we face is speed, is time. The world of identity is being built as we speak, and it will be built. There is a very profound fundamental need. It will be built. And so I think the chance is ours to build it the way we're talking about, which is collaborating, working together between private sector, large businesses and smaller businesses. We have the opportunity to build it. And if we don't, it will be built for us by others. It will become an international system or solution, or it will be not a solution as advanced and as well adapted to our country as it could be. And so I think that's the challenge we're facing. And I do believe people are quite aware of it and conscious that we have to move fast, but it is hard to be aligned, collaborative, matching every need and at the same time moving fast. I think that's the challenge we're facing.
Greg, I saw you nodding all along during Joni and Franklin's comments. Is there anything different you would add in terms of strengths and weaknesses?
I totally agree with everything they're saying. So the one more strength that we have is this privacy bent that Canada has. So the notion that, hey, do you consent to share this data from TD Bank, from Rogers, from my driver's license with the state to the government for this purpose, and information isn't being shared without consent and there's no one watching your information. This privacy that started with privacy by design is kind of built in. So everyone's realizing that's kind of the core. It's certainly the core of what we do with Verified Me. If there's one I'd probably echo Franklin's on the timing to get there, right? So we're all racing to get there, and everyone has a little bit of different angles how we get there. There's some in the industry that believe there's silver bullets, right? I can take a picture of a driver's license, take a picture of the back, do a picture of my face, and because that came from the province and because it's me, therefore I must be Greg. That in the cyber world, that's just false, right? That it's very easy for someone to get a fake copy of a driver's license to try and do a face, and they're going to be able to get through some of this. They can do deep fakes if I'm doing a video authentication. It's the combination, like I think what the real security folks realize is the combination of assets that makes it strong. If I can prove that I have this driver's license and I also can prove I'm loading it on Greg's phone, that's a lot stronger than just having a driver's license. If I can prove I can log into my bank, I've had this account for 8 years, and all the dozens of layers of security, there's no bots, there's no replays, it's coming from my device that banks are checking. So having these different attributes and being able to share it and work together, we're constantly feeling a sense of urgency to say, hey, we've got to bring these things together and get the standards that work. And so I'm always feeling this urgency to say, how do we go faster? Because Canada has the opportunity to show the world how to do this well. And I really want to see that happen.
Well, that's a good segue. I was going to ask Franklin what the national and international opportunity to lead in digital ID represents for Canada.
It's exciting to see Canada being a thought leader on the topic, and we're looking to see Canada show the way. And Canada has a very unique, like Joni and Greg said, has a very unique position with a lot of provinces, a lot of government entities, a lot of different, very diverse set of partners, and the solution has to work for everyone. And it is creating a lot of complexity, which means that the key word is about being interoperable and working together and having solutions that talk to each other. And maybe different verticals might have different solutions, or maybe different entities or provinces might have different solutions, but they all have to talk together. And that's the complexity we're solving. And that complexity is very valid across the world. And very few countries have mastered it. And I think we are on our way to mastering it. And if we do, we'll really be showing the world how to share, how to connect. And that is a very precious aspect of digital identity that a lot of jurisdictions are trying to go after. That is a key piece of complexity we're likely to solve here. I think we've made a few very promising steps on this path. It's a long road, and so hence the urgency comments on we want to keep moving on it.
I think that another indicator in terms of the international opportunities are that one of the things that we develop in collaboration with many partners at the DIACC is the PanCanadian Trust Framework. This is a framework that sets out guidance for solutions so that ideally they are interoperable across different technologies. Now, the scope of our work is inclusive of public and private sector working together. It's economy-wide scope. There has not been another framework around the world that's taken that kind of scope that's focused on the economy. And I think for those who pay attention to these topics around the world, there's a framework in Europe called the EIDAS. The EIDAS framework is all about identity across the different European member states. Now, they are moving into their EIDAS 2.0 version, and what they're trying to do with the 2.0 version is create a single digital market that is inclusive of private sector capabilities. And so I think that's an important indicator that we have actually started from the position of let's work economy-wide scale, which includes both public and private sector. So that's the road that we've been on, and now we're seeing other important trading partners like those in the European Union that are now moving to bring the private sector into the work that they've done. So I think that's a leading indicator that we're on the right path. And I think that when we think about solving digital identity and a pan-Canadian approach, not only do we need to solve this for British Columbians, Ontarians, and Quebecers, but there are strong reasons why British Columbians want to be able to do business with North Americans, and why Quebec would want to be doing business with France, other Francophone countries. And so those are just examples, but the trade opportunities and the economic growth opportunities are within Canada and well beyond Canada by getting this right.
I'd love to get a little bit more nuts and bolts in terms of the kinds of collaborations you think are needed for Canada to continue to lead and to grow its position, especially within Canada. We often hear from our interviewees that sometimes it's more difficult to collaborate between provinces, for instance, than it is between one province and the US, for example. Could you give me a little bit of an idea, Greg? What are your thoughts on the kinds of collaborations you perhaps are already leading or you would like to see more of?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this stuff, like the stuff we do already with logging into government, I mean, a lot of that stuff is based on standards. So things like SAML, things like OpenID Connect are really important standards, and they underlie a lot of the work that DIACC does and the rest. There's new work that's coming on this notion of a verifiable credential. So the idea that I could have a driver's license, I could pre-validate it, put it in my device, and then be able to share a claim to someone who wants to know that it's me, and I have control of that, and only I know where it goes. That the standards are emerging on that. They're all under the W3C verifiable credential standard. So we're doing a ton of work with Homeland Security. Just recently, they announced work that we're doing on a new project on social security numbers and how do you actually protect this. But lots of interoperability with lots of companies around these global standards. The thing I'd push Canada on mostly is these standards that are emerging as global standards, W3C, OpenID, and the rest. These are the things we have to adopt. We started early, and people that start early sometimes get proprietary things. Then you try and move it towards these international standards as quickly as you can. Because as Joni says, I'm going to want to show up. Like the last project we did for Homeland, we were able to show I could load my green card validated by government and show up somewhere and prove that I have a green card and I'm able to work in the United States. These things are really important, but they're only important if I can share it to all the participants in different places. So we're going to have interoperability across borders. We should try and develop things that are based in Canada on this collaboration model, but using these international standards to go. And I think that things like W3C verifiable credentials, and the Canadian government's already started some work on verifiable credentials and how do we do interoperability on that. But being able to take that thing like a driver's license and add to it, with a province that's not as secure as some other provinces, I can load the driver's license, but then I can add, and I logged into my bank, and I loaded on this device, so that a relying party can trust it. What we don't want to end up with is bespoke systems, like in Australia, New South Wales, as an example, came out with a driver's license you can load it in your phone, but it's so weak none of the banks trust it, right? So it's not very good if we get to that point, or if people can use it, load it quickly, and then it's very easy to create fraud. It may help someone get into a bar and prove I'm 19 quickly, but if I'm trying to use it to open a bank account, if I'm trying to use it to see my health records, people want to be secure. So using these standards, I think we can bring the elements together and make it work well.
Franklin?
Yeah, I would. I agree with everything Greg said, and the standards are key. And because we're early days in this world of building identity, standards matter a lot. And I'm saying we're early days. The underlying trend that's going on here is that this is about consumers who are empowered to share their data, and it's a bit of a new world that's opening up here. And it's about customers deciding that they want to be able to share their data with a third party of their choice. And their data may be their identity or identity attributes, or it may be their financial transaction data. And that would be falling under open banking or consumer-directed finance, as we call it in Canada. Or it could be other types of data. And everything we're talking about here is about creating the standards and the interoperability between these various types of data. And so Greg has mentioned a few identity standards. I would add on the list the FDX, one Financial Data Exchange. We just announced over the summer that it was coming to Canada. This is a standard around open banking, very much complementary. And we have to think of all these standards and make sure that they're all working together to have a consistent and interoperable ecosystem. Because at the end of the day, we will be successful. And we know expectations by consumers is that it has to be simple, safe, and secure, and that they're empowered to actually make decisions and share their data as they see fit.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit to that complementary, slightly different angle. In terms of what other collaborations, I would say two main points. First point, we should fully leverage the existing collaborations that we do have in Canada today. And so doing this foundational work, bringing public and private together, is very hard work. So what we should be doing is fully investing in those organizations, in those spaces where we do see a lot of collaboration happening and has been happening over the years. So let's really invest in the collaborations that exist today, and get all the benefit that we can out of those. Let's see more collaboration like that, which happens at DIACC, or that which happens at the Digital Supercluster, for example, which is very open, and it means that we can all learn from the things that we're doing. So I think those are important points about the existing collaborations, because it is tempting to sometimes create another collaboration on top of it. So let's fully leverage what we have. The second thing I would say about what kinds of collaborations is that I think that Franklin and Greg did a great job of talking through some of the tech, and those are all important pieces of the puzzle. I think we need some collaborations with regard to the legislation and with regard to particularly legislation around data. So, for example, the field around verified credentials and digital wallets is very exciting. It's going to take time to test, to learn, to propagate, to know that we can have confidence in these kinds of solutions. That said, building pathways so that attribute authorities, those who are authoritative for particular pieces of data, building in pathways so that they can actually verify those kinds of data with technologies that exist now, that's important too. And we've seen down in the US, in a time that is so politically polarized, there's been a bill that's gone forward with both support from the left and from the right to demonstrate and build a pathway so that organizations like the Social Security Administration and others can have a pathway based on legislation to act as validators of data with consent of the user, with consent of the citizen consumer. So we need to be addressing the now solutions that help us get access to data, as well as the long-term, the bleeding edge new innovation that's coming forward.
So, Joni, I'm going to stay with you just for a moment and just ask you to tell us about the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework, the PCTF, and about some of its recommendations and why that's important for Canada.
Thank you so much. The Pan-Canadian Trust Framework is a one-of-a-kind framework that's been built through collaboration of the public and the private sectors. The scope of the framework is around verification of people, verification of entities like businesses or governments, and also verification of the relationships between each. So that's a unique scope, and that's why that scope is scoped as such, so that it addresses economic-based use cases that are important for all of us, that drive societal benefits. Now, the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework is technology agnostic, so it prescribes different technologies at different risk profiles. It doesn't say you must use one technology or another, but it does note which are appropriate per different kinds of risk profiles. And it really sets that guidance as a tool for interoperability. It is not a singular tool, but it is a tool to bring together and organize the forces within Canada to make it happen. We're very proud of the work that's being done there. We've run over 41 public review periods. We've processed 3,500 comments from over 5 countries around the world. So while this is a Canadian framework, we're building for the digital economy. So we've worked in the open and very inclusive around the world. And we think that's unique as well. We've reached version 1.0. So this is the first of a kind, first version of this framework. And now we're moving into what we're calling alpha testing. And alpha testing is a period where we work with diverse stakeholders. We make sure that the framework performs as it was designed to, that it provides value, and that it will be one of those tools to accelerate Canada forward. Ultimately, in 2021, we will be launching a trust mark program, and that will be a market-driving trust mark, and that will enable different solutions and service providers to recognize each other as having gone through some sort of verification or assessment to know that that product is more trustworthy and they can have more confidence in it. So this is one of those building trust features by placing in this program, working together as a community and sending signals that certain products and services have been verified, and so therefore they should have more trust and more confidence. And those are the kinds of tools that we need to move the digital economy forward for Canadians.
Did you say all that on one breath? Sorry, I know you're not eating later.
I'd like to add a little bit to that. Or Greg, I don't know if you were going to jump in.
Well, what I was going to do is I was going to ask Greg to first tell us from SecureKey's point of view and similar companies in the digital tech or fintech space what the value of the framework is before asking Franklin to talk more about the value for the overall economy, perhaps.
Yeah, the value is you have to have standards, right? You have to agree as a nation that it's important to have public and private. As Joni says, you have to be able to say, hey, collaborations that exist, let's figure out how to bring them in and make them interoperate and get going, and then you're able to move this forward in a secure and safe way for everybody that's there. To Joni's point earlier, some of these standards aren't yet finalized, like the W3C verifiable credential. While there's drafts, probably won't get finalized till summer next year, but lots of places like British Columbia and others are playing with these credentials. We're playing with them. We're working with Homeland to bring it together to make it interoperable. Because we want to be able to do the things we're doing now with things like FTX, which is largely on the OpenID rails, things like concierge where you're logging in with your bank, but also bringing in driver's license and other credentials so that a person can show up and prove who they are. Like I love the use cases, right? Show up in an apartment to rent an apartment and be able to prove I'm really me, that my credit is good, that I have an income over X, and be able to make the payment. That's kind of what we're trying to get to. Like right now, that's really hard. To get a mortgage, how do I prove my income? If I could share from the CRA, we did a BCIP with them, I can share my validated income. I can share from a bank that I'm really me. I can share my credit score. We could get to a point where we're approving the mortgage in seconds instead of in weeks, right? So the whole point is like the value to the Canadian economy, showing up to get my to see my health records and proving it's really me, like what we're doing in Canada with the IAA program in Ontario. This is so important for Canadians to be able to do things more efficiently because it makes the economy move. I don't know, Joni, you probably have the points of how much it moves, but these are the things consumers want to do. And we all want to do it. We all have time limits and restrictions in our life. We want to be able to do things faster and with more security to get things done, more safety.
To be clear, for you as an entrepreneur, as a business leader in the fintech space, this is clearly an enabler.
We add a little bit of the value that comes in the middle. What we try to do is bring authenticators and trusted parties together to work together. So I can prove from TD or CIBC or Royal Bank, we can help them initiate a claim to say, yes, this is Greg coming from the bank. And we connect the telcos so that Rogers or Bell or TELUS can say, yep, this person has Greg's phone, the SIM's in the device, the SIM hasn't changed. And we can connect so we can say, yes, this is Greg's driver's license from Ontario or BC or other places. Greg's matched the face, he's loaded on his phone, and other variables. We can bring credit scores into play. We can say if someone's on a fraud watch list. So the whole point is that parties that use this need to know it's safe, and consumers need a really easy user experience with less friction. So if I can just show up and it says, hey, are you willing to share from your bank, from your telco, and your driver's license? And I say yes, and it goes to get that data and it shares it to someone. I'm going to love it as a consumer, but under the covers, the cyber stuff it's doing, checking my phone, checking that I've done all the diligence of my bank and it's my device and it's on this IP address, not coming from some other country. The stuff that it does under the covers is as important as the user experience, but both have to work really well. And as Joni says, if we don't bring together private sector into this and just use public sector, it's not going to be secure enough. It's not going to be fast enough. It's not going to be adopted the same way. Consumers want this to work for healthcare, for getting a car, renting an apartment, getting a bank account. They want it to work ubiquitously everywhere. So how do we make it simpler for all of us?
Franklin, from your perspective, working at one of Canada's largest banks, you deal with a lot of different stakeholders, of course. What does the framework mean to you? And are the banks in general, is the banking sector supportive and behind it?
Absolutely. It's very important. I'm going to start to say what DIACC is. Joni introduced herself as leading DIACC, and DIACC is a very important feature that the Canadian market has. Very few countries have this type of collaboration between private and public sector. And the PCTF is the brainchild of DIACC. Like it's been a few years of work, and so it's a major milestone that this summer was reached with the publication of the first version of the PCTF. And so it's a proud moment for us all. And I would say to your question, yes, every banks are there, and the whole industry is behind this effort. More than the industry, I would say industries and government are there. And this is what matters really. Like the PCTF is one of the key foundations to help us build interoperable identity across Canada. And that is very important. When you look across the world, there's been a few countries where government have tried to build a scheme or private sector has tried to build a scheme, and it's always, to Greg's point, it always comes down to adoption. And adoption, to be adopted, it is key to be interoperable and to be adopted by more than one vertical. And this is what the PCTF enables. PCTF is putting in place the foundations, the capability for identity schemes developed in Canada to work together and to work in the private sector and in the public sector. And so it's a major milestone, and we see it as a key foundation for identity networks of being built in Canada.
I think Franklin summed it up well. We really have strong participation from all of the FIs in Canada, from telcos, from credit agencies, from government, and a desire to say, let's solve this. And it's really just, hey, connecting the dots, making it interoperable and getting it to go.
Well, let's get to the point where we articulate and try to, in a way, distill or summarize your key recommendations, and I guess in particular for governments, plural. As we said, we have a federal government, but there is quite a bit of provincial jurisdiction here at play as well. For industries, as you just said, feel free to highlight any in particular, and also for citizens, and I would even say for our Canadian culture. A lot of this, I suppose, has to do with evolving as a culture and perhaps getting past some barriers and adopting basically those important technologies. So I'll start with Joni. What would be your key recommendations to improve digital ID and our position as well competitively?
Yeah, thank you. The key recommendations to improve our position competitively are that we need to continue to invest in our collaborative approach. We need to put real investment and sustained investment behind this. And as noted earlier, we do need to continue to move faster. If we look at Canada's digital charter, for example, the principles laid out in Canada's digital charter are directly addressed by solving digital identity that works for all Canadians. The PanCanadian Trust Framework is a tool to help set that guidance for interoperability, and its principles are based on security, efficiency, societal, and economic benefits for every Canadian. Every Canadian should have the opportunity to participate in the digital economy to secure their job. Whether they live in the cities or the rural landscapes, they should have the opportunity to participate in this ecosystem. This is not only about convenience, this is about national economic security. If we look at the world the way that it exists today, to do counter visits and password resets, whether you're in person or on the phone, that can take up to $30 per person per visit. This is a massive amount of money, and that's just looking at inefficiency alone. Studies have shown that by solving digital identity, we can bring back 3 to 6% of GDP to the Canadian economy. That's roughly $47 to $96 billion to bring back into our economy to make our lives better. We have to act now. COVID has only driven that urgency. So any organization that wants to move this space forward for their business, for their government, for their family, get involved. Get involved if you're in the industry with an organization like DIACC. If you're not in the industry, demand this from your MPs, demand this from journalisms, demand these kinds of solutions and services, because we can't wait another winter in a time of social distancing without them.
Well, and of course, $50 to $100 billion, you're speaking at the beginning, potentially, of a fairly severe economic crisis. That's very substantial. And I suppose This is the best time to step forward, isn't it? If now, then when?
This is the time to step forward and not to step back. And when you're thinking about that value creation, imagine it like trying to predict the value of connecting up the electrical grid before the electrical grid was connected. Think of all the things that we can do now with the electrical grid connected. Identity and the ability to verify yourself with security, with privacy, and with respect and empowerment over your own data. It's very hard to predict what that will be, but we firmly believe it is in the billions of dollars, and we need to act now.
Franklin, so what kind of actions would you like to see to improve digital ID in Canada, and by who? Maybe you can give us some concrete examples here.
First, Joni, thank you for bringing the value at stake. I think it's important to keep in mind. This is a very tangible, real economic value for the Canadian economy. So it's important to keep that in mind. I'd like to focus on the consumer. Like the reason why this is highly relevant. And you're asking what advice do we have for participants in this endeavor. I think keeping the consumer in the center is very important. And we've been talking about this is about consumers being empowered to sharing their data. And for this to be successful, there's a few key conditions that have to be met. One is it has to be safe and secure and private, to Greg's point. Like it has to be very well architected and safe and secure and private, and that consumers feel they are in trust and can leverage these capabilities in trust. It has to put the consumer in the center. Consumer has to be in control. And it's important that, and this is what consumers and customers expect. They expect to be in control of their data, in control of their lives. And so to be successful, we have to give them that control. I think a lot of solutions we're seeing are heading that way. The last piece I would add, and it's an important one, is about education. And this is where stakeholders can all play a role. But we are entering a new world where, sharing our data, managing our data, being proactive about how we protect ourselves, our data, is kind of an emerging trend, emerging capabilities that we're all learning. We've got a long way to go on educating consumers and making sure people understand what they're doing, who are they sharing data with, how safely are they or not. And that education is a long road that I think every stakeholders in the ecosystem can participate and contribute to.
Thank you, Franklin. And finally, Greg, what are your actionable items and for who?
The biggest point I make is coming to what Joni said earlier. Like, this is not a wait till next year to get it done. I can do this today. I can show up at a bank. I can log in at my existing institution. I can share my information. I can check with a telco. I can check with Equifax. I can get my data, and away I go. I can add my driver's license or my passport and be able to validate it. And we're working now, even with projects with the federal government, to get interoperability and get these going. This exists today. And so my big push is, look, this is happening now. Canada has the opportunity to not only get the economic benefit, but also to show the world how this cooperation works and get things done, right? It's not going to be brand new networks that get done. It's connecting the collaborations, as Joni said before, that exist and showing how we get it done, how we manage the cyber threats that are coming, get a much stronger position on cyber resilience, and also enable consumers to be able to be in control and share their data. I mean, that's the end. And I think we have, like, we're within shooting distance of getting that done. We have to just get over the line and get it done.
And now to wrap this up, I'd like to ask each of you, one at a time, of course, to give us your final 20 seconds pitch. And I'd love if you could very specifically say, I'd like this group or this person or this minister maybe to do this. What's the low-hanging fruit? Joni, I see you enthusiastically nodding, so we'll start with you in 20 seconds.
What we believe needs to happen right away is that the identity file, this digital identity file, the federal government needs to be shared by Industry Canada and by the digital government minister, Minister Baines and Minister Murray. And what that's going to do is going to provide checks and balances to ensure that Canada's way forward is both focused on the economic sector, the private sector and industry, as well as citizens and their needs. Further, I would like to see the federal government to commit to working with the provinces and territories to issuing one piece of government-issued digital identity or making that kind of data available for Canadians to use. And we'd like to see that by December 31st, 2021.
Wow, that's very specific. Thank you very much. Who wants to go next?
To build a successful digital identity schemes in Canada, Canada is a vibrant and diverse economy and diverse country. There will be several solutions. A lot of people are building solutions. My message to all stakeholders is to collaborate and work together on developing common rails, common standards. And so my ask is participate to industry groups, make sure you're building to be interoperable with others. It's great to optimize your solution, make sure it works with others across public, private sectors. And so this message is addressed to provinces, federal government, businesses in various verticals. Make sure what you're building is interoperable and plugging to the rest of Canada. This will make us stronger and successful together.
Thank you. And finally, Greg?
I think the points that the others have raised are all great points. I think that right now we're at a point where the cyber capabilities of the bad folks are going up exponentially. And unless we bring together the capabilities of the nation's banks, telcos, and governments working together, we're not going to get ahead of that. And we have to be doing that now. And so there has to be a realization that, yes, it's empowering consumers to share their data, but there are real cyber threats now. And if we don't work together, we're not going to solve that.
One thing, DIACC performed a survey of Canadians coast to coast to coast last year. And one of the things that we found in that survey overwhelmingly was that 7 out of 10 Canadians wanted to see the public and private sector work together to get this done. So Canadians believe the right way forward is by public and private working together. So that survey is available on our site in French and English. We're going to rerun it this year to see what's changed. But Canadians want this, and they want government and business to work together.
That's a very good point to make. That means that it can be an electoral issue in the future if it doesn't get drowned down by everything else. Joni, Frank, Greg, thank you all very much for sharing your insights. Lots to consider, lots of opportunities for Canada. It seems like we're already well positioned, so hopefully we can go after those opportunities. And it also seems like the time is now. So it's also good to hear that in this context that is challenging, of course, there are some real opportunities. Our goal at TheFutureEconomy.ca is to promote Canada's future economy and future competitiveness by promoting these kinds of important national conversations on key issues that affect all of us, from government and the private sector to everyday Canadians. So again, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Real pleasure.
You're very welcome.